This is the first test of me reading an English book. This book is called Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare. Longman Simplified English Series. This book has been specially prepared to make enjoyable reading for people to whom English is a second or a foreign language. An English writer never thinks of avoiding unusual words, so that the learner trying to read the book is it in original form, has to turn frequently to the dictionary and to loses so much of the pleasure that the book ought to give. This series is planned for such readers. There are very few words used which are outside the learner's vocabulary. These few extra words are needed for the history and are explained when they first appear. Long sentence and difficult sentence patterns have been simplified. The resulting language is good and useful English, and the simplified book keeps much of the charm and flavor of the original. At a heifer move more difficult level, there is the Bridge series, which helps the reader to cross the gap between the limited vocabulary and structures of the simplified English series and full English. It is the aim of these two series to enable thousands of readers to enjoy without great difficulty some of the best books written in the English language, and in doing so to equip themselves in the pleasantest possible way to understand and appreciate any work written in English. The 2000 root words of the General Service list of English words of the Intern Report of Vocabulary Selection. I will skip that part because here we have pronunciation and dictionary and how to pronunciate some words. But I will say the introduction. Charles and Mary Lamb were a brother and sister who lived in London 100 years ago. They were very fond of plays, very fond of boys and girls, and very fond of one another. So the two of them together made a book for boys and girls out of the stories of Shakespeare's plays, which at once became and has since remained a great favorite. In this book, the Lamb's tales are told in a simpler form. A common word is used where the lambs used an uncommon one, and long sentences are made shorter. Only some of the stories are retold in this book. Most of the other ones written by Charles and Mary Lamb are in more tales from Shakespeare in this series. C.K.W. This is the pronunciation, consonants, diphthongs of the most used words in this book. The Tempest. The people in the story, Prospero the banished Duke of Milan, Antonio, his brother, who's in the wrongful Duke, the King of Naples, Ferdinand, his son, Miranda, daughter of Prospero, Ariel, a spirit serving Prospero, Caliban, a monster. The Tempest, the island of spirits. There was a certain island in the sea on which there lived only an old man, whose name was Prospero, and his daughter Miranda, a very beautiful young lady. They lived in a cave made out of rock. It was divided into several parts, one of which Prospero called his study. There he kept his book, which chiefly treated of magic, and the knowledge of this art he found very useful to him. For being thrown by a strange chance upon his island, which has been enchanted by a witch called Sycorax, Prospero, by the power of his heart, set free many good spirits that Sycorax had shut up in the bodies of large trees, because they had refused to do her wicked commands. These gentle spirits were ever after obedient to the will of Prospero. Of this, Ariel was the chief. The lively little spirit Ariel had no evil in his nature, except that he took rather too much pleasure in troubling an ugly monster called Caliban, whom he hated because he was the son of his old enemy Sycorax. Prospero had found this Caliban in the woods, a strange twisted thing, far less like a man than an ape. He took him home to his cave and taught him to speak, and Prospero would have been very kind to him, but the bad nature which Caliban had from his mother Sycorax would not let him learn anything good or useful. Therefore, he was employed like a slave to fetch wood and do the most laborious tasks, and Ariel had the duty of forcing him to this service. When Caliban was lazy and did not do his work, Ariel, who could be seen by no eyes but Prosperous, would come quietly up and pinch him, and sometimes threw him down in the mud. And then Ariel, in the likeness of an ape, would make mouths at him. Then, swiftly change his shape in the likeness of a hedgehog, he would lie rolling in Caliban's way, who feared the hedgehog's sharp points would prick his bare feet. With many such like cruel tricks, Ariel would often trouble him whenever Caliban failed to do the work which Prospero commanded him to do. The Tempest. Here is Miranda asks Prospero to stop the storm. At the image. The Tempest. Having these powerful spirits obedient to his will, Prospero could by their means command the winds and the waves of the sea. By his orders, they raised a great storm. In the middle of the show, his daughter, a fine large ship, struggling with the wild sea waves that every moment seemed about to swallow it up. The ship, he told her, was full of living beings like themselves. "Oh, my dear father," said she, "if by your art you have raised this dreadful storm, have pity on their sad trouble. See, the vessel will be dashed to pieces. Poor souls, they will be all be drowned. If I had power, I would sink the sea beneath the earth, rather than that the good ship should be destroyed, with all the precious souls within her." "Be not so wild, daughter Miranda," said Prospero. There is no harm done. I have so ordered it that no person in the ship shall receive any hurt. What I have done has been in care of you, my dear child. You do not know who you are or where you came from, and you know no more of me, but that I am your father and live in this poor cave. Can you remember a time before you came here? I think you cannot, for you were not there than 3 years of age. "Certainly I can, sir," replied Miranda. "But what?" asked Prospero. "By any other house or person. Tell me what you can remember, my child." Miranda said, "It seems to me like the memory of a dream. But had I not once 4 or 5 women who served me?" Prospero answered, "You had, and more. How is it that this still lives in your mind? Do you remember how you came here?" "No, sir," said Miranda. "I remember nothing more." A wicked brother. "12 years ago," Miranda continued Prospero, "I was a Duke of Milan, and you were a princess and my only child. I had a younger brother whose name was Antonio, to whom I trusted everything, and as I was fond of quiet and deep study, I commonly left the governing of my state affairs to your uncle, my false brother, for so indeed he proved, I careless of all worldly ends, buried among my books, gave my whole time to the bettering of my mind. My brother Antonio, being thus in possession of my power, began to think himself the duke indeed. The chance I gave him of making himself beloved of my subjects awakened in his bad nature a proud desire to rob me of my dukedom. This he soon did with the aid of the King of Naples, a powerful prince who was my enemy. Why did they not that or destroy us?" asked Miranda. "My child," answered her father, "they dared not. So dear was the love that my people bore me. Antonio carried us on a board ship, and when we were some miles out at the sea, he forced us into a small boat without either oars or sails or ropes. There he left us as he talked to die. But a kind lord of my court, one Gonzalo, who loved me, had privately placed in the boat water, food, clothing, and some books which I value above my dukedom. "Oh, my father," said Miranda, "what a trouble must I have been to you then?" "No, my love," said Prospero, "you were a little angel that preserved me. Your smiles made me to bear bravely my evil fortune. Our food lasted till we landed on this desert island, and since then my chief delight has been in teaching you, Miranda, and from these lessons you have gained so much." "Heaven thank you, my dear father," said Miranda. "Now tell me, sir, your reason for raising this storm." "I will," said her father. "By means of this storm, my enemies, the King of Naples and my cruel brother, are cast ashore upon this island." Having so said, Prospero gently touched his daughter with his magic stick, and she fell fast asleep, for the spirit Ariel just then appeared before his master to give an account of the tempest and of what he had done with the ship's company. And though the spirits could never be seen by Miranda, Prospero did not wish her to hear him speaking, as woe seemed to her with the empty air. "Ariel, will my brave spirit," said Prospero to Ariel, "how have you performed your task?" Ariel gave a lively story of the storm, and of the fears of the seamen, and how the king's son Ferdinand was the first who leaped into the sea, and his father thought he saw his dear son swallowed up by the waves and lost. "But he is safe," said Ariel, "in a corner of the isle, sitting with his arms folded sadly, crying out for the loss of the king, his father, whom he thinks drowned. Not a hair of his head is touched, and his princely garments, though wet in the sea waves, look fresher than before." "That's my good Ariel," said Prospero. "Bring him here. My daughter must see this young prince." "Where is the king and my brother?" "I left them," answered Ariel, "searching for Ferdinand, whom they have little hopes of finding, thinking they saw him drown. Of the ship's crew, not one is missing, though each one thinks himself the only one saved, and the ship, tugged out of sight, is safe in their harbor." "Ariel," said Prospero, "your work is faithfully performed, but there is more to do." "Is there more work?" said Ariel. "Let me call to your memory, master. You have promised me my freedom. I have done you faithful service, told you no lies, made no mistakes, served you without evil word or thought." "What?" said Prospero. You do not call to mind what a pain I freed you from? Have you forgotten the wicked witch Sycorax, who with age and wickedness was almost bent double? Where was she born? Speak, tell me. Sir, in Angers, said Ariel. Oh, was she? Said Prospero. I must tell what you have been, which I find you have forgotten. This bad witch Sycorax, for her witchcrafts too terrible for humans' ears, was driven from Algiers and here left by the sailors. And because you were a spirit too soft to do her wicked commands, she shut up you in a tree, where I found you howling. This pain, remember, I freed you from. Pardon me, dear master, said Ariel, ashamed to seem unthankful. I will obey your commands. Do so, said Prospero, and I will set you free. He then gave orders what further he would have him to do. And away went Ariel first to where he had left Ferdinand, and found him still sitting on the grass in the same sad state. Oh, my young gentleman, said Ariel, when he saw him, I will soon move on. You must be brought, I find, for the Lady Miranda, to have a sight of your pretty figure. Come on, sir, follow me. The prince followed in wonder the sound of Ariel's voice, till it led him to Prospero and Miranda, who were sitting under the shade of a large tree. Now Miranda had never seen a man before, except her own father. Miranda and Ferdinand. Miranda, said Prospero, tell me at what you are looking there. Oh, father, said Miranda, in a strange surprise. Surely, that is a spirit. Lord, how it looks about. Believe me, sir, it is a beautiful creature. It is not a spirit. No, girl, answered her father. It eats and sleeps and has sense such as we have. This young man, you see, was in the ship. He is somewhat changed by grief, or you might call him beautiful. He was lost his friends, and is wandering about to find them. Miranda, who thought all men had grave faces and grey beards like her father, was delighted with the appearance of this beautiful young prince, and Ferdinand, seeing such a lovely lady in this desert place, thought he was upon an enchanted island, and that Miranda was the goddess of the place, and as such he began to address her. She answered, a little fearfully, that she was no goddess, but a simple maid, and was going to give him an account of herself, when Prospero broke in upon her. He was well pleased to find they admired each other, for he plainly saw they had, as we say, fallen in love at first sight. But to try Ferdinand's faithfulness, he resolved to throw some difficulties in their way. So coming forward, he addressed the prince with a solemn air, telling him he came to the island as a spy, to take it from its real master himself. "Follow me," said he. "I will tie you neck and feet together. You shall drink sea water, shellfish, and dead roots shall be your food." "No," said Ferdinand, "I will fight against that till I see a more powerful enemy," and drew his sword. But Prospero, waving his magic stick, fixed him to the spot where he stood, so that he had no power to move. Miranda hung upon her father, saying, "Why are you so unkind? Have pity, sir. I will promise for him. This is the second man I ever saw, and to me he seems a true one." Prospero angry. "Silence," said their father. "Onward more will make me angry with you, girl. What? Speak for a spy? You think there are no more such fine men, having seen only him and Caliban? I tell you, foolish girl, most men as far past him is beauty, as here does Caliban." This he said to test his daughter's faithfulness, and she replied, "I have no wish to see a finer man." "Come on, young man," said Prospero to the prince, "you have no power to disobey me." "I have not indeed," answered Ferdinand, and not knowing that his way by magic he was robbed of all power to fight. He was filled with wonder to find himself so strangely forced to follow Prospero. Looking back on Miranda as long as he could see her, he said, as he went after Prospero into the cave, "My spirits are all bound up as if I were in a dream, but this man had words, and the weakness which I feel would seem light to me. If from my prison I might once a day behold this fair maid." Prospero did not keep Ferdinand shut up long within the cave. He soon brought out his prisoner and set him a hard task to perform, taking care to let his daughter know what he had done, and then pretending to go into his study, he secretly watched them both. Prospero had commanded Ferdinand to put in order some heavy logs of wood, kings' sons not being much used to laborious work. Miranda soon after found her lover almost dying with weariness. "Alas," said she, "do not work so hard. My father is at his studies. He is safe for these 3 hours. Please rest yourself." "Oh, my dear lady," said Ferdinand, "I dare not. I must finish my task before I take my rest." "If we will sit down," said Miranda, "I will carry your logs for a little while." But this Ferdinand would by no means agree to. Instead of a help, Miranda became a hindrance, for they began a long conversation, so that the business of law-carrying went on very slowly. Prospero, who had set Ferdinand this task merely as a trial of his love, was not at his books, as his daughter thought, but was standing by them unseen, to overhear that they said. Ferdinand asked her name, which she told, saying it was against her father's command. She did so. Prospero only smiled at this first example of his daughter's disobedience, for having by his magic art caused his daughter to fall in love so suddenly. He was not angry that she showed her love by forgetting to obey his commands, and he listened well pleased to a long speech of Ferdinand's in which he said he loved her above all the ladies he ever saw. In answer to his praise of her beauty, which he said was greater than any word in the world, she replied, I do not remember the face of any woman, nor have I seen any more man than you, my good friend, and my dear father. But believe me, sir, I would not wish any companion in the world but you, nor can my thought form any shape but yours that I could like. But, sir, I fear I talk to you too frequently, and my father's commands I forget. At this Prospero smiled and nodded his head, as much as to say, this goes on exactly as I could wish. My girl will be Queen of Naples. And then Ferdinand, in another fine long speech, for young princes speak in courtly language, told the simple Miranda he was the next to be the King of Naples, and that she should be his queen. Oh, sir, said she, I am a fool to weep at what I am glad of. I will answer you in plain and holy simplicity. I am your wife. If you will marry me, before Ferdinand could thank her, Prospero appeared before them. Fear nothing, my child, said he. I have overheard all and like all you have said. And Ferdinand, if I have to hardly use you, I will make you rich payment by giving you my daughter. All your troubles were only trials of your love, and you have nobly stood the proof. Then take my daughter as my gift, which your true love was bought, and do not smile that I tell you she is above all praise. He then, telling them that he had business in another place, asked them to sit down and talk together, till he returned, and this commanded Miranda seemed not all willing to disobey. Antonio and the King. When Prospero left them, he called his spirit Ariel, who quickly appeared before him, eager to tell him what he had done with Prospero's brother and the King of Naples. Ariel said he had left them almost out of their senses with fear at the strange things he had caused them to see and hear. When weary with wandering about, and half dead for want of food, he had suddenly set before them a delightful feast, and then, just as they were going to eat, he appeared before them in the shape of a greedy monster with wings, and the feast vanished away. Then, to their great wonderment, this monster spoke to them, bidding them remember their cruelty in driving Prosperous from his dukedom, and leaving him and his infant daughter to die at sea, saying that for this cause their fearful things had come upon them. The King of Naples and Antonio, the false brother, were filled with sorrow for the injustice they had done to Prospero. And Ariel told his master he was certain their sorrow was real, and that he thought a spirit could not help pitying them. Then bring them here, Ariel, said Prospero. If you, who are but a spirit, feel for their grief, shall not I, who am a human being like themselves, have pity on them? Bring them quickly, my pretty Ariel. Ariel soon returned with the king, Antonio, and old Gonzalo, who had followed him, wondering at the wild music he played in the air to draw them on to his master's presence. This Gonzalo was the same who had so kindly provided Prospero formerly with books and food, when his wicked brother left him, as he thought, to die in an open boat. Grief and fear had so deadened their senses that they did not know Prospero. He first made himself known to the good old Gonzalo, calling him to preserver of his life, and then his brother and the king knew that he was the Prospero they had tried to kill. Antonio, with tears and sad words of sorrow and true shame, begged his brother's forgiveness, and the king said he too was very sorry that he had helped Antonio to drive out his brother. And Prospero forgave them, and when they promised to give back his dukedom, he said to the King of Naples, I have a gift in store for you too, and opening a door, showed his son Ferdinand playing at chess with Miranda. No joy could have been greater than the joy of the father and the son at this unexpected meeting, for they each thought the other drowned in the storm. "Oh, wonder," said Miranda, "what noble creatures these are! It must surely be a fine world that has such people in it." The King of Naples was almost as much astonished at the beauty and excellent graces of the young Miranda as his son had been. "Who is this maid?" said he. "She seems the goddess that was parted us and brought us two together." "No, sir," answered Ferdinand, smiling to find his father had fallen into the same mistake that he had made when he first saw Miranda. "She is only a woman, but by God's goodness she is mine. I chose her when I could not ask you, my father, for your consent, not thinking you were alive." She is the daughter of this Prospero, who is the famous Duke of Milan, of whose fame I have heard so much, but never saw him till now. Of him I have received a new life. He has made himself to me a second father, giving me this dear lady. "Then I must be her father," said the king. "But oh, how strangely will it sound, that I must ask my child forgiveness." Miranda and Ferdinand playing chess. "No more of that," said Prospero. "Let us not remember our troubles past, since they so happily have ended." And then Prospero kissed his brother and again gave him his forgiveness, and said that a wise and overruling God had permitted him to be driven from his poor dukedom of Milan, that his daughter might have the crown of Naples, since by their meeting in this desert island it had happened that the king's son had loved Miranda. These kind words which Prospero spoke, meaning to comfort his brother, so filled Antonio with shame and sorrow that he wept and was unable to speak. And the kind old Gonzalo wept to see this joyful union of hearts, and prayed for blessings on their young couple. Prospero now told them that their ship was safe in the harbor and the sailors all on board her, and that his daughter would go home with them the next morning. "In the meantime," says he, "take such food as my poor cave provides, and for your evening's pleasure I will tell the history of my life from my first landing in this desert island." He then cailed for Caliban to prepare some food and set the cave in order. And the company were astonished at the strange form and savage appearance of this ugly monster, who, Prospero said, was the only servant he had to wait upon him. Before Prospero left the island, he let Ariel go from his service to the great joy of that lively little spirit, for though he had been a faithful servant to his master, he was always longing to enjoy his freedom to wander without a master in the air like a wild bird, under green trees, among pleasant fruits and sweet smelling flowers. My pretty Ariel, said Prospero to the little spirit when he made him free, I shall miss you, yet you shall have your freedom. Thank you, my dear master, said Ariel, but give me leave to attend your ship home with favorable winds before you bid farewell to your faithful spirit. And then, master, when I am freed, how merrily I shall live. Prospero then buried deep in the earth his magical box and stick, for he was resolved never more to make use of the magic art. And having thus overcome his enemies and being united to his brother and the king of Naples, nothing now remained to complete his happiness but to see again his native land, to take possession of his dukedom, and to be present at the happy marriage of his daughter Miranda and the Prince Ferdinand, which the king said should at once take place with great splendor on their return to Naples. And at Naples, under the safe guidance of the spirit Ariel, they, after a pleasant voyage, soon arrived.